Hey everyone, welcome to our small footprint. We have another couple of days of kitchen prep. Again, we're still heading towards the end of the shopping period, so we're scraping the barrel for a few different things, but we have still plenty of food prep to go. And I also received my garlic that I had ordered. Now is a great time to order garlic off the local growers because you normally plant between Anzac Day and Mother's Day, so they've got the ends of the garlic. I buy the seconds because I can't necessarily afford the really prime seed garlic, but we still get something out of it, and each year we get a little bit better at growing it, so that's fine. And I get some of the seconds for cooking with as well, so even if I can't manage to grow a year's worth, at least I have stuff that I bought and it's locally grown to preserve for the rest of the year. So I brought you along for some of that. So enjoy watching, and I will see you again in a couple of days. As we get to the end of the month, we start having to make a few more things that require a bit more effort. So for breakfast this morning, Sonnet decided to make sourdough pancakes. So normally I do my sourdough pancake mix up the night before so that it ferments overnight, and then I add some more raising agent in the morning and bake, and then I cook them, and they've got this really nice chewy, doughy texture. I didn't think about it, so I decided that we'd just make basically what a sourdough discard pancake. So they have the sourdough starter in them. It does create some flavor profiles and some texture, but nowhere near if I had have left it overnight. But it uses up the end of the discard that I had, the end of the sourdough starter that I had there, so that I could refeed it to use it to make bread, which was something I needed to do anyway. So Sonnet put all the ingredients with some direction, obviously some help, and Kavik was sooking in the background over something. I can't remember what it was right now, so I let him sit there with, within arm's reach and moan over whatever it was that was the issue, and he perked up eventually in the end because Sonnet wanted him to help her with the pancakes. So then they cooked them all up on the cast iron pan. This Camp Chef stove is actually a really good height for the kids to be able to cook things on the pan. They don't have to stand on stools, which I don't like near an oven, and they're at a height to be able to see the flames, which I think helps remind them that it's hot, and to be able to stand over the pots and maneuver things very easily. Sonnet is actually left-handed, which I always find odd to watch, and I find it hard sometimes how to direct her to do things because she's left-handed, but she did manage very well with the pouring of pancakes and flipping them and making her little brother little tiny mini pancakes throughout the period of time to try and keep him amused and perked up. Having older siblings at times obviously can really benefit things that go on in the house. Sometimes it just makes things more difficult, but other times it's lovely to see the interactions between the pair of them. So they just had these sourdough pancakes. I think today they just had them with some maple syrup. I cooked some bacon up for them to have with it as well. One of the kids had peanut butter on them. I think they can have whatever they want on them. It's just something for them to eat as a breakfast type time food. It's not the only breakfast that they eat, but they constantly eat, so it's just one of many grazing meals for my little hobbit-like children. So they enjoyed that, and Sonnet enjoyed the process of being able to make them. After we were finished with the pancakes, I started on some garlic prep. So I bought some seconds garlic from a local grower. At this time of year is when we plant garlic. So I bought some to plant and some to eat. So I pulled out the biggest cloves, started cracking and pulling out the biggest cloves to put in a bowl for planting, and then put the smaller cloves in another bowl for consuming. So I started work on that in between everything else that I was doing, but it's an ongoing process over the next couple of days. I bought 5 kilos of it, so it's an extensive amount, and I actually have some more coming from a different supplier because I want to try multiple different types of garlic for growing this year because I haven't had much success, so I'm still trying to figure out exactly what types of garlic grow best here for us. And I also bought a whole bunch of extra amendments for the beds for the garlic as advised by the Tasmanian Garlic Company, who is one of the companies that is big on selling seed garlic in Australia, and they have a whole page devoted to telling you how you should set up your beds for growing garlic. So I'm going to do it right this time and hopefully get something out of the garden. Even if it isn't a year's worth, it'd be nice just to have some success with that. I picked a dozen odd pumpkins out of the yard the other day, out of the pumpkin patch. We still have quite a few out there, but we grabbed some of the bigger ones before it rained the other day so that they wouldn't split. So I decided I would cut a couple of them up and roast all the pieces, and then I can use that in various different ways. The kids have requested gnocchi again, which I will probably make tomorrow night maybe, and then I also make their pumpkin chocolate chip muffins with it, which they really like. So I can roast up bunches of pumpkin and then I can just freeze it and pull it out and defrost it when I want to use it for the muffins, and that works really well. I had some of the stripy pumpkins, the crosses that I showed in one of the other videos, the cross-pollinated ones, and when I cut them open, they're definitely a different colour and a slightly different texture on the inside, but they look pumpkin-like, and that's how I'm going to use them. For dinner tonight, again, we're in week, well, it's been over 4 weeks now since I did my last groceries, so we're down to using some of the shelf-stable stuff as part of our meals. So I did a simple tuna bake for the kids, which they really enjoy, and so they don't find it a hardship to eat. So I make a white sauce using ghee, flour and chicken stock mainly. I will use some rice milk or something if I have it, but if I don't, then it still works out fine. I cook that off like any standard white sauce or roux. Cook the butter, cook the flour, add the stock and stir. I put dehydrated onion flakes or my homemade onion soup mix in this to help flavour it as well, which is what all the little chunks are. And then I add a large tin of tuna as well as a 1 kilo bag of frozen vegetables into the white sauce to cook off as well, and let it thicken up and sit for a while. Then flavour it as necessary. You can add salt, pepper, paprika, any sort of flavours you want, some bouillon if you've got it, anything like that. It just depends on your tastes. I then added it to some spiral pasta and mixed it through. So I pre-cooked the spiral pasta just to al dente because I'm going to bake it as well, and then mixed the white sauce through the pasta. I put it in baking trays, so it fits in 2 of these ceramic baking trays that I have here. I actually broke one of these today because I put it in the smoker and there was too much direct heat. I really need to replace these baking trays with cast iron ones for the way that we cook. And I topped it with breadcrumbs that I had made from sourdough bagels. So we had some stale sourdough bagels with bagel seasoning on them, and I turned them into breadcrumbs in my Thermomix to use, and stuck them in the freezer to use for things like this. And I put a little bit of seasoning over it, and it's the sweet rub that I use for my pork that I mixed in with the breadcrumbs and spread it with a bit of oil for browning, or you could put melted butter or melted ghee over it if you wanted. We're getting low on ghee at this time of the month, so I just used some spray oil. While that was cooking, I put together some bread for the next day. My KitchenAid bowl was dirty and I only own one of them, so I just made a no-knead shaggy dough, brought it all together, and just add all the ingredients, the starter and the water and the flour and the salt, and you bring it all together into a shaggy mess in the bowl, and then let it sit for half an hour to an hour, and it'll all sort of hydrates the flour and turns into a completely different consistency. And then you come back every half an hour to an hour and you just stretch and fold the dough into the center of it, which is just basically an in-bowl kneading sort of a method that you can use. I then pulled all the pumpkin out of the oven that I'd had roasting, so it was well roasted. I like to roast it for gnocchi and things like that because it loses a lot of moisture, whereas if you steam it, you're holding a lot of moisture still. So I find roasting better. It goes nice and soft as well. And I roasted a couple of heads of that garlic in some foil with a little bit of oil and salt as well that we could have with our dinner, which is absolutely delicious and something that I definitely do when I have fresh garlic. It's such an easy way to eat it, and it just tastes awesome that way. I did more stretches and folds of the dough throughout the evening as I went along, so just pulling from the edges of the bowl into the center and rotating the bowl and stretching that dough and creating a little bit of tension within the dough. It's basically, as I said, just kneading within the bowl. So the dough sat out on the bench all night, and then the next morning I poured it all out onto my mat and divided it. So I just divided it into 8 pieces, this particular dough, because there's 8 of us, so it gives us 1 each, and shaped each little piece into a bit of a baguette or a long roll. So there's just a process of pulling all the edges in and pinching them so that you're creating a nice tight skin over the top of the rolls. I didn't show afterwards, but I did score the top of these rolls, though I couldn't find my razor blade, so the scoring is not real great, but I did score them before I baked them as well. So I let them rise for a little bit and then scored them ready to be baked. The boys decided that they wanted to help with the garlic, so I set them up with a couple of bowls, and they were just grabbing heads of garlic and cracking it for me and placing it in the bowls, and then I sorted it out later size wise, and they sat there for quite a while. Actually, they finished off the rest of the box. They were happy to sit there and do it for that long, which was kind of surprising, but they just chatted about whatever they were chatting about and kept on going, and I helped them crack some of the heads that were really hard, and they did it all, and that was great to get their help. I pulled the baguettes out of the oven once they were cooked so that we could have them for lunch. So I just grabbed them out, let them cool for a little bit, and then I sliced them all up and put them on a board for the kids to put whatever they wanted to put on them. I think there was some leftover, some of them had leftover Tuna Bake, I think, on them. Others had peanut butter. I think there was some cold meat in the fridge as well. They just grabbed whatever was there and had that on the baguettes for lunch. Then I went back to peeling garlic. So we had sorted all the cloves out and put it all into size bowls. So some kept for the planting, and then a little bit of excess kept for planting as a backup because I haven't got the new lot yet, so check what I want to do, and the rest of the small stuff was put in big bowls to be peeled. So I spent a long time peeling garlic. To fill this jar was my first task. I was going to fill this Kilner fermenting jar, which is a really nice jar, and then do it with honey. So I filled the jar almost all the way up to the top with the peeled cloves. I don't have a problem with bruising my cloves before putting it in there because we use this mostly for cooking, so it doesn't have to look perfect. Some people like their cloves in honey to be pristine. It's really not. Well, not much in my place is pristine, so why would the garlic be? And we just fill it with honey. So this is a garlic fermented in honey, so you have to use raw honey, and this honey is from somewhere local to me, which is awesome. I bought a jar of light honey and a jar of dark honey, and I'm going to do a jar of each to see the difference in taste. And you just pour the honey in. I used my Fowler's packing stick to move the garlic around to let it settle, but the longer that the honey sits with the garlic releases some of its liquids, waters, and the honey will thin out, and it will turn into more of like a marinade type consistency, so the garlic will move down in it. Tomorrow I will put a glass fermenting weight in the top of the jar as well to keep the honey underneath to keep the garlic underneath the honey. You can just stir it or tip the jar and get it all coated, but I have a tendency to forget, so I find that these weights work well. The Kilner lids have a built-in fermenting valve, one-way valve, so I don't have to burp the jar either. If you put a solid lid on them, you have to make sure to burp the jar a couple of times a day because the fermentation creates a lot of activity and a lot of bubbling. So having the fermentation lid just saves me one more task. So I clean the rim, put the lid on, and then it will sit on the bench until it stops bubbling, which could be, in this weather, it could be 7 to 10 days because it's getting quite cold at night and it goes a little bit dormant when it's cold. So I will bring you along each day and give you a look at how that goes, and show you each day the change in the honey and things like that. So thank you very much for joining me again today, and I will see you again in another couple of days. We're, dragging the ends of the barrels at the moment for some of the food, but I still like to try and make things as diverse as possible, and that's my aim. So thank you for watching.